What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, legendary promoter, top ranked CEO, Bob Arum, weighs in on the possibility of re-signing undefeated three-division world champion, former junior welterweight undisputed world champion, currently the WBO welterweight world champion, and is widely considered the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Terence Bud Crawford, coming off of a dramatic knockout victory over former IBF welterweight world champion, British superstar boxer Special K KELL BROOK in the fourth round of their fight. Bob Arum was asked, what's the likelihood of bringing back Terence Crawford and re-signing Terence Crawford? And Bob Arum had an interesting take regarding bringing back Terence Crawford. Bob Arum believes that Terence Crawford actually cost him money, right? He's working against the system, according to Bob Arum. He says, let's listen to what Bob Arum had to say regarding the situation and the possibility of bringing back Terence Bud Crawford. This is what he had to say when asked, when doing an interview with Lance Pugmire of The Athletic. He had this to say. The question was, can you bring back Terence Crawford? What's the possibility? What's the percentage? Bob Arum had this to say. He says, he may be the greatest, quote, he may be the greatest fighter in the world, but hey, I ain't going bankrupt trying to promote him and bringing him back. Then he says, the question is, do we want to keep him? I could build a house in Beverly Hills on the money I've lost on him in the last 3 fights, end quote. So Bob Arum doesn't believe Terence Crawford is worth the money and worth the hassle, essentially. He says that he believes that Terence Crawford is actually hurting them, right? They're not getting their return on their investment when it comes to Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford, we know his lawyer recently came out and he stated that he contacted top ranked CEOs and promoters, and they're not happy. Terence Crawford's side is not happy. Terence Crawford is scheduled to be a free agent come October. Terence Crawford did an interview with Brian Custer on the Last Stand podcast, and Terence Crawford said that it's business. Brian Custer asked him, what's the possibility of you coming to the PBC once you become a free agent? That's where all the big name welterweights are. And he says, there's a possibility, right? He says it's all business. So we'll see. He said, my contract will be up in a short period of time. Essentially alluding to the fact that he's willing to go to the PBC, Premier Boxing Champions, and get these fights. This is what Terence Crawford's lawyer had to say. He says, Terence Crawford's relationship with Top Rank is reportedly strained. Crawford sent a letter to Top Rank airing grievances, including frustrations at not having, quote, a big money breakthrough fight. It's claimed the contract will end October of 2021. So this is now going public. But for the entire buildup of this fight between KELL BROOK and Terence Crawford fight week, you saw Bob Arum doing no interviews, right? He was nowhere to be found. You didn't see Bob Arum until last night at the fight when you saw Bob Arum essentially resurface. But for the most part, Bob Arum, for the buildup of the fight, did no interviews, was nowhere to be found. Terence Crawford has been linked to other big fighters, but if you look at the buildup last night on ESPN, as they built up Terence Crawford KELL BROOK fight, they used the PBC, Premier Boxing Champion, their fighters as a staple point to say these fighters don't want to fight Terence Crawford. They're avoiding Terence Crawford, thus pushing the narrative that Terence Crawford is unable to secure these big fights because they're reluctant to make the fights. And that's solely not true. The fact now, this proves with Bob Arum coming out and stating this, is that they're just not willing on ESPN, the Top Rank side, to put up big money for Terence Crawford and these fights. Keith Thurman just recently came out when Terence Crawford was looking for a name opponent to replace what was reported of a deal that was agreed upon between himself and 8th Division World Champion, Filipino icon, legendary boxer, who's currently the WBA welterweight world champion, Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao. That fell through, according to Bob Arum, due to the fact that the Board of Health stepped in and told them that they can't guarantee fans will be in attendance, so they won't get a return on their investment, and giving them, enough money in return for the purses they're going to pay Manny Pacquiao and Terence Crawford. Keith Thurman, who was a former unified welterweight world champion, he held the WBC and the WBA title. He just lost his WBA title to Manny Pacquiao. Keith Thurman was a guy who threw his hat in the ring and said, "Give me $10 million, we'll make the fight happen." Terence Crawford and Terence Crawford's manager and trainer, Bomac, stated that Keith Thurman was pricing himself out the fight. Sean Porter stated that he contacted Terence Crawford and asked him, "What's the possibility of us fighting? Can we make this happen?" And Terence Crawford said, "Well, I have to fight another big plans," meaning a fight with Manny Pacquiao, "but if that falls through, then I'll revisit a possibility of facing you." Well, the Pacquiao fight fell through. He didn't revisit Sean Porter. Instead, he went the route of fighting KELL Brook. Errol Spence suffered a horrific car accident just 12 days after unifying the welterweight division when he defeated two-time welterweight world champion superstar boxer Showtime Sean Porter, September 28th of 2019. And then 12 days later, October 10th, he suffered the horrific car accident. Terence Crawford made it abundantly clear he wanted no parts of fighting Errol Spence Jr. coming off that car accident because he wouldn't get his just dues should he be victorious. So that X's out Terence Crawford, that X's out Keith Thurman, that X's out Sean Porter. Danny Garcia is not an option because Danny Garcia, two-division world champion, former junior welterweight, unified world champion, former WBC welterweight world champion, is fighting Errol Spence Jr. Bob Arum made it clear that Terence Crawford had no interest in fighting WBA regular champion Yordenis Ugas. So who left is there from the PBC that's looking to avoid fighting Terence Crawford? That is a myth. The problem is, it's abundantly clear Bob Arum does not want to pay big money. He doesn't want to dish out big money for Terence Crawford to fight these guys because he don't believe that he could get a return on his investment. That's abundantly clear. It's not that these PBC, Premier Boxing Champions fighters, are looking to avoid fighting Terence Crawford. It's that Bob Arum doesn't want to shell out the necessary money to make these fights happen. Okay? He paid, essentially, Amir Khan, who was defeated by Danny Garcia, knocked out in his prime, more money than he did offer to Danny Garcia to fight Terence Crawford. So it's clear. Bob Arum has made it clear also when he stated that Sean Porter and Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman weren't worthy of him negotiating with. He only wanted to negotiate with Al Heyman, Premier Boxing Champions founder and advisor, for a fight with Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. Nothing more, nothing less. So when you have guys like former world champion, multi-division world champion Timothy Desert Storm Bradley, who is now a colorful analyst for ESPN and Top Rank, stating that these fighters don't want to fight Terence Crawford, and when you have ESPN promoting and using the PBC fighters all night, naming them, showing their highlights, and saying they didn't want any parts of Terence Crawford, is completely false. They named Manny Pacquiao as one of the fighters that was avoiding fighting Terence Crawford. When Manny Pacquiao was with Top Rank and Bob Arum, he stated that he wanted $20 million for the Terence Crawford fight. They said he was pricing himself out. He left Top Rank. He got the money he was looking for with two fights. In both his fights with Adrian the Problem Broner, 4th Division World Champion, and with Keith Thurman. He got the $20 million that he was looking for. So was he pricing himself out, or was he just simply standing on the square for what he thought he was worth? And so they name-dropped Manny Pacquiao last night as a guy that was avoiding Terence Crawford. But Bob Arum made it abundantly clear that they had an agreement to fight. This fight was supposed to be Manny Pacquiao overseas, but the Board of Health had stepped in. So Manny Pacquiao agreed to fight Terence Crawford. He was willing to fight Terence Crawford. It wasn't Manny Pacquiao's fault the fight fell through. It was the Board of Health, according to Bob Arum. So why was Manny Pacquiao name of all names on this list when he just recently agreed and signed a contract to fight Terence Crawford? It wasn't Manny Pacquiao that pulled out. According to Bob Arum, the Board of Health stepped in and said they can't have the fight pushed forward. So why did ESPN promote it as if these fighters are looking to avoid Terence Crawford? This is where the fans, the boxing pundits, and the boxing world got confused when Terence Crawford even re-signed with Top Rank, because there was no big-name fighters over there for him to fight the welterweight division. Recently, Bob Arum on my show told me that if Terence Crawford wanted to wait, he doesn't mind him going and leaving and sign with the PBC, but if he wanted to wait, we have fighters coming up from junior welterweight, 140, that he could fight in the future in big fights. So it's abundantly clear they have no qualms about making these fights, because now you're asking two mother networks, ESPN, Fox, and Showtime, to come together on multiple occasions to make these big fights and split the pot. They don't want to do that. They don't get the return on the investment like they want to. So they're not looking to make these fights happen. So with that said, Bob Arum is saying that Terence Crawford is costing them money. You can expect to see Terence Crawford at the PBC very soon. But that's all I got for y'all. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed? Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shouts out to the entire LDBC. Shouts out to New Media. Shouts out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.